France is now ungovernable.
That's France right now. Because the Africans said no more exploitation. They're burning. The country is in a wreck. Yeah, this is happening right now in France. There's an online movement. It started online, it's moved into person. It's called Block Everything. They're blocking access to everything. Go search France, Paris right now.
Guys, look at this. Earlier this year, Ibrahim Traore, he had a response to Emmanuel Macron's dismissive comments on Africa. This exchange now has gone full circle with all the protests going on in France. Listen.
He also insulted all Africans.
I think they forgot to say thank you to us. It's not a big deal. It will come with time.
There is a part that caught my attention where he talked about ingratitude.
Gratitude, I am well aware, is a non-transmissible disease to humans.
He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human. In his eyes, I think that if he is not an atheist and he prays, every morning when he wakes up and prays, he should also pray to the Africans. Because it is thanks to our ancestors that there is a France today. He should pray to us.
Macron said that Africans should be grateful, but Ibrahim Traore said it's actually the other way around. With all the protests going on in France, do you guys think that Ibrahim Traore's words have gone full circle? Because without free access to Africa's resources, France is in a free fall, and many of the French people, they're angry at Macron.
The solution is not to move Africans to Europe, but to free Africa from certain Europeans. France continues to exploit Africa by printing currency for 14 African nations, making children work in mines, extracting raw materials, as happens in Niger, where France extracts 30% of the uranium it needs to run its nuclear power plants, while 90% of Nigerians live without electricity. Don't come here to lecture us, Macron, because Africa is fleeing from you.
Africa is the only reason why Western Europeans get to enjoy such a high quality of life, especially for France. They brag about being able to live well even though they don't have to work as hard as Americans, but they omit the fact that all that comfort they enjoy comes off of the back of African resources and labor. England, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France all made a massive scramble for Africa in the 1880s, and France by far still has their foot in their old colonial ways. Even though these African nations have declared their independence, France and a couple other countries are still exploiting them, and they have given nothing in return to these African nations. They have built very little in infrastructure and construction. They have given next to nothing compared to how much they have taken to support their ways.
Is it true most of France's financial wealth right now is still built on
$500 billion a year?
Wow. From Africa?
From Africa.
Wow.
500. That's a lot of money.
And is it true that the deals are such that an African nation that has this deal with France cannot do business around the world with their natural resources without the first right of refusal with France?
First right of refusal is in
and they
France's
can still
hand.
tell them no?
Mm-hmm. They can still tell them no.
So if they've dug gold, coffee, cocoa, whatever, they go to France like, hey, you guys want this? And they say, nah. And they say, okay, we're going to sell it over here. France can still say, nah, you can't do that.
So insane.
And all those nations still run on the French franc, which is also hilarious because even France has
goes
a
on
euro.
the euro.
Exactly.
So wait, they buy money from France with their own natural resources.
Yeah, and if they don't
that's
comply,
not even worth anything in France.
Yep, and if they don't comply, the faucet's turned off immediately.
The French government has officially collapsed. For all the decades and the centuries, the French government has been feeding on the West African countries. Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, Chad, Ivory Coast, all countries that were colonized by French have been feeding the French economy. And you know about the Sahel nations, cutting the links. Of course, this has drastically affected the government or the France government. Now you see what is happening. I hope other French-speaking countries can take the lead of the Sahel nations and completely cut links with the French government. Africa is the lifeline of Europe, my friends. Africa is the lifeline of the entire world. Until when will we understand this? We don't know the power that we have, Africans. We are a sleeping giant. Just wake the fuck up.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks again for tuning in to Profess. If you're new, kindly consider subscribing. Alright, have you ever thought that the reason why France, one of the most powerful and second largest economy in Europe, is actually to start looking shaky is not just because of inflation or protests at home, as we are seeing the country look in shambles, look like a third world country, as a lot of youth in France are protesting and trying to change the government. Have you ever stopped and thought about it, that there might be something under the skin, something that Western media is actually shy about letting you know? For decades, France has actually been living off the backs of African countries. 14 African countries in particular, they have been benefiting from African labor, minerals, and corrupt politicians. But now something has changed. African nations, especially Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, are rising up and finally saying enough is enough. Now, here's what's happening. In Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, under leaders like Ibrahim Traore, they have kicked out the French military bases and repudiated all deals, and they went on to nationalize mining operations and started to actually benefit from their own mines, which were being exploited by Western powers, especially European powers. Now, we have to understand the state of the matter here. Because of these resources that were being sent to France, about 14 countries in Africa were sending about 80% of their revenue to France and allowing themselves to use a currency that is largely printed in France, the CFA franc. Now, out of these many countries, just 3 countries said no: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, under the guidance of Captain Ibrahim Traore. Africa is finally rising and kicking out Western powers and saying no to imperialism and neocolonialism. Now, this is causing France to actually lose the global power that it had, because their economy is shaking. If the economy is actually shaking from just 3 countries saying no, what is going to happen when all of the 14 countries actually end up saying no? But without saying much, I want us to check this video that I've sampled for you guys. I want us to understand the root of the matter, what has been happening, and why French youth are actually protesting the government right now, and why the government of France is actually in a tough spot that it's gonna be hard to get out of. Let's take a look. I'll be back with more commentary after this.
France's government just collapsed again. Here's what you need to know in 90 seconds. Prime Minister François Bayrou lost a confidence vote in Parliament, becoming the 4th French leader to fall since President Emmanuel Macron's re-election in 2022. And the vote wasn't even close. Opposition parties from both sides united to bring him down. Why? It's all about money. Bayrou tried to push through a budget with 44 billion euros in cuts. That would have meant freezing pensions and slashing healthcare. The opposition said, no way. Here's the real problem though. France is broke. Its debt has reached nearly 114% of its GDP. Last year's deficit was almost double the EU's limit. Bayrou knew he'd likely lose, but gambled anyway, calling the confidence vote himself. Opposition leaders called it political self-sabotage, and they were right. How did we get here? Macron's snap election gamble last year backfired. His alliance lost seats, while the far-right National Rally became the biggest party. The parliament is deeply divided. So what now? Macron must appoint a 5th prime minister. He's ruled out new elections, so he'll have to find someone who can manage this broken parliament. The opposition wants Macron himself to resign. That seems unlikely, but one thing's certain: Europe's 2nd largest economy is stuck in political paralysis with no clear way out.
So France is broke because France's entire wealth is built off of exploitation of its colonies. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, basically West Africa. That's why France was the 2nd largest economy, because it had African countries to exploit. So right now, the Sahel Alliance, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali have kicked France out. A bunch of other African countries have done the same. So right now, France has no way to get money at all. There's no way, there's no magic they can do to bring the money back that they used to have. So that is the only reason why France is pushing for a war with Russia. France needs this war to survive. And here's how the play out is going to go from their perspective, at least from a public perspective. France and 26 other countries attack Russia. They start they create destabilization, possibly European War III, because I don't say World War III, because ain't no African countries ever got into that fight. It's a white people thing. So European War III is going to create another destabilization around the world, and it's going to allow France to finally rewrite things, go back and re-enslave or recolonize its former colonies, and this time it will do it in a way that they will ensure they won't lose this access all over again. Why is this working? Russia's plan to destabilize the West is to liberate the African countries from. So Russia's not doing this because they love Africa. No, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Russia is doing this to fuck up the Western countries, and that's basically what's going on. France is done.
So now that Africa, 14 countries in Africa has cut France totally off. They told France that they will not be sending them no 85% of their income. They will not be doing it. They've been doing that shit since 1959, and they will no longer be doing it. France thought that Africa was playing. And no, they weren't. Because now France, their economy is tanking big time. They are in such a deficit. Their country is just falling. It's burning right now. It hasn't even been 3 months, and they can't pay their bills. Those 14 countries in Africa is putting France fucking out of business. And that's only 14 countries. You know, Africa has 52 or 53. What is France gonna do? And Africa don't even want to make no deals. They don't even want to work with them. They don't want to do shit. They're done. They're finished. It's over with. We don't want to talk to y'all no more. Them 14 countries are trying to get the other countries to just start pulling back too. So France is falling. France is falling, y'all.
So the French government has fallen again, but international news media is going to be very shy about telling us the real reason why it's fallen, the economic reasons why it's fallen. On his way out, the ousted Prime Minister, Mr. Francois, said, "You might kick me out, you might remove me, but that does not change the economic problems for the country." I'm paraphrasing. The real reason why France has failed as a government is because Africa has taken its power back. Ever since the country of Niger, in the Sahel, in Central West Africa, decided to nationalize its uranium, France has never been the same again. This uranium that state-owned companies like Orano, French-owned companies like Orano had been siphoning, stealing under the previous government, today, Niger turned off the faucet. Niger said no more. So Niger, under the new governance of President Tiani, is nationalizing its uranium. This uranium France was stealing not only to light its beautiful cities like Paris and Nice, it was also using it to run its electrical manufacturing and industries. All of these are processing and running their nuclear reactors on top of it all. So these things that are the foundations of an economy, like manufacturing and processing, right now that the electricity in France, their energy is not safe. They do not have a reliable place to get their energy from. This is why they're suffering. But it's not going to be told that way on international news media. You're only going to hear it from people like me and others who are truth tellers. So yeah, this is why. This is what happens. This is proof that African leaders are in service of either them or us.
France is now ungovernable. You better believe it. France is now ungovernable. The country that actually made its money from bleeding black people. The country that forced Haiti to pay 150 billion for their freedom. And one of the reasons why Haiti is still in the situation it is right now is because of France. France, the country that bled Africa, making sure that the countries that it colonized basically had to pay a colonial tax for being colonized. That country, you know, the country that one of the biggest slave traders in the world, that country has run out of money. They cannot afford to pay the pensions. They cannot afford the healthcare system. Literally, France is literally on the verge of economic collapse. And this is serious. France is in worse trouble than Greece was, except at the time the European Union was so powerful at the time. But now the European Union was weakened by Brexit. The European Union has been weakened by Trump turning against them. So now the European Union, they're just running around like headless chickens. They cannot even bail France out. France is literally on the verge of collapse. And coming close after France is going to be the UK and Germany.
Africa is the only reason why Western Europeans get to enjoy such a high quality of life, especially for France. They brag about being able to live well even though they don't have to work as hard as Americans, but they omit the fact that all that comfort they enjoy comes off of the back of African resources and labor. England, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and France all made a massive scramble for Africa in the 1880s, and France by far still has their foot in their old colonial ways. Even though these African nations have declared their independence, France and a couple other countries are still exploiting them, and they have given nothing in return to these African nations. They have built very little in infrastructure and construction. They have given next to nothing compared to how much they have taken to support their ways. Out of the 8 African coups that have happened since 2020, 7 of them were from French colonies. The French do not know how to build, they do not know how to innovate, they do not know how to grow democracy in any part of the world, which is why for the past 60, 70 years, they have just had French puppets that were ruling these African countries that finally got sick of how they were being treated. China has only taken an interest in Africa for 30 or 40 years, yet they have built more industry and infrastructure than all of the other European countries combined. So of course, the African nations are going to have a much more favorable disposition towards China, since they are the ones who are actually building factories, roads, bridges, hospitals. China is actually divesting a lot of their own resources to make this possible. And you guys know how I feel about a lot of Chinese policy, but they did hit the nail on the mark when it comes to Africa. It is pretty clear that Russia's Wagner forces have had a lot to do with the coups that have taken place in Gabon, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And even though the Russians aren't trying to actually help anyone, I believe they are trying to foment chaos and destabilize a lot of positions in the West. This can be an overall good thing for Central Africa. Even though the Russians' goal is to create a lot of instability for the West, this instability can spread to a lot of other African countries, and that can actually hurt a lot of China's positions there. Make no mistake, despite what you're seeing in the media, the US will find a way to exploit whatever is happening in Africa. At first, they seemed that they were very pro taking down the Niger coup, and now they've kind of backed off, and they said that they are going to respect the current government. No, a lot of these African nations don't have a favorable viewing of the United States. The US will always find a way to profit off of whatever instability is caused. If there is going to be a disruption in the energy supply, I will bet you that the US will make money selling its liquid natural gas and oil. If there is going to be widespread war, the US is going to make a lot of money selling its weapons. I would not put it past the United States interests to have their cake and eat it too. They may be happy about China building all of this infrastructure because that means the US doesn't have to. It means the US doesn't have to invest in anything to make Africa more prosperous and rich, but they can reap all of the benefits for when that actually happens. In my opinion, I think that every Western interest should be kicked out of every African country and then reintroduced as a potential trading partner among peers with equal standing, instead of these African nations having to deal with the West like guaranteed exploiters.
The solution is not to take Africans and move them to Europe. The solution is to free Africa from certain Europeans who exploit it and allow these people to live off what they have. This is called the CFA franc, a colonial currency that France prints for 14 African nations, and by virtue of which it exploits the resources of this nation.
This is a child working in a gold mine in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is one of the poorest nations in the world. For Burkina Faso, which has gold, France prints colonial currency. In return, it demands that 50% of everything Burkina Faso exports ends up in the coffers of the French treasury. The gold that this child crawls into a tunnel to extract mostly ends up in the coffers of the French state. So,
réveille-toi, le pouvoir est à toi. Français, réveille-toi, le pouvoir est à toi.
So France is broke because African countries have kicked them out and they don't allow them to exploit them anymore. And as you saw, there's a big rally in the country. They're protesting the president, Macron. They want him out. Yesterday they voted out the prime minister, which was the third prime minister in 14 months. He got a vote of no confidence, the same last three, because the last three prime ministers cannot present a bill or cannot present a plan on how to revitalize the French economy. Now, the only way to present a plan to revitalize the French economy is by re-enslaving or re-exploiting African countries, and Russia is helping African countries. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they're building nuclear plants. Like, it's helping African countries. That's Russia's plan of fucking up the West. So the West is using a proxy war to destroy Russia. Russia is deciding, okay, I'm going to take away your means of living. So Russia has been saving African countries from France, and they have a planned demonstration tomorrow, the 10th. Wednesday, the whole nation is going to have this massive demonstration tomorrow in protest of Macron. But yeah, France is broke, and everything they're doing right now, a lot of the French understand it, but majority of the masses don't. Everything they're doing right now, nothing can be done. The only way France goes back to where it used to be is to find new countries to exploit for resources. That's it. France has nothing. They have nothing. England is next. Oh, I also forgot to add, this is why France has been pushing for a war with Russia. France has gotten 26 countries right now to agree to invade, to go into Ukraine, which is going to be a violation, which will force a war with Russia. The reason France wants this is if it does that, then Russia is now faced with more problems, more wars. Then it takes away some of its resources from Africa. It creates new chaos, and then France uses that as an opportunity to go back into Africa and then find new countries to exploit. The only way France can survive is exploitation. So they need war right now to make that exploitation happen.
Alright guys, there you have it. Actually, have you ever felt like when someone has been taking away something from you for years, your land, your labor, your minerals, your wealth, even your identity, and suddenly when you actually start pushing back, everything on their side starts collapsing. You actually begin to understand that, wait a minute, they had convinced you that you needed them, but the reality was they needed you. This is exactly what's happening to France and what we are seeing right now. And if you're actually in the United States, you can relate to this because black communities were exploited for centuries. Their labor and their wealth was extracted without actually giving them returns. And this is why most black Americans are actually asking for reparations, and they rightly deserve so, because the country was built off of their backs for free. Now, this is exactly what has been happening here with France, especially. They have built their country off of the backs of Africans. The African youth has been mining gold, uranium, and for pennies, while France has actually used these resources to build their country and to give social safety nets to their population. Now, this is where the saying comes from when French people are actually trying to make themselves look better. They say that they don't have to work much and they have a good life. You have a good life because you've been stealing resources from African countries. Let's be honest, this country would be nothing. And we are exactly seeing that if only 3 countries have said no and kicked out the French military bases and French mining companies, and the economy is starting to go in shambles, what will happen? if all the 14 countries actually say no and kick out all imperialism and neocolonialism. Now, let's understand how for decades France has benefited from Africa, because this is something that most of the people will never know. And you need to do some digging for you to actually realize this. And I'm positive that a lot of the youth in France, even though they are protesting, thinking that it's the mismanagement of their government that is causing the economy to go in shambles and actually the cost of living to skyrocket. They do not know the behind the scene. It's actually not the government and corruption and mismanagement. It's because your government has actually lost something that they were taking from African countries, because for decades France has controlled the CFA francs, the currency used by 14 African countries, meaning that these African reserves were tied up in French banks, and this limited sovereignty and kept France's access to wealth steadily. Can you believe this? After independence, this was actually called the colonial tax. It was just like payment for France giving them independence. And this is exactly what has been happening for over 50, 60 years. Key resources that France has actually relied on, like uranium from Niger, used for nuclear energy and powering about 70% of French electricity, gold from Mali and Burkina Faso, some of the richest reserves in West Africa, oil and gas from Gabon, Chad, and others. Now you have to understand that France wasn't actually just trading. It was positioned like a landlord actually charging rent on independence. They just gave a portion to corrupt politicians, presidents, and they took the rest home and built their countries. Yet these Western medias will always show you Africa as the poorest continent, as a continent that actually needs Western Europe to survive. They will always show you immigrants coming to France from West Africa as the problem, yet they will never actually tell you the real reason why these young people are looking for greener pastures in Western Europe. Now the tables are actually turned because things are shifting. The balance of power is actually shifting because now most African nations are waking up to young revolutionary leaders like Ibrahim Traore, and they are saying no, enough is enough. And this is exactly why France is being affected, because without a steady $500 billion flow from Africa through trade advantages, military deals, and resource extraction, France's economy is straining. High inflation, declining growth, mass protests in Paris, as we have been seeing, first over pension, now wider over the cost of living and the government legitimacy. But the behind the scene, it's all connected with Africa and these countries that are kicking out France out of their country, because we all know that France had a grip on African countries. What do you think about today's episode? Let me know in the comments. I'm your presenter, Profez. If you're new, kindly consider subscribing, hit that like button. See you on the next episode.